Hi there, this is John Frenay, and welcome to an Encore presentation of our Legacy Business Spotlight. These are best done in person, and with the current state of emergency restrictions, that's just not possible. So we will be re-releasing our past episodes every Saturday at noon until this pandemic is in our collective rearview mirror. Until then, enjoy this Encore presentation of our Legacy Business Spotlight.
Some businesses succeed, some don't. Then there are those that seem to have been around forever. The true entrepreneurial success story. How did they do it? What was their vision? What makes a success? In this special episode for Eye on Annapolis, we speak with the true success stories, those business owners that have been around for decades, learn from their successes and failures. Now, here's host John Frenay.
We're here up on Jabez, did I say that right? Jabez Run Road in Millersville with Solar Energy Services, and we are here with the president, CEO, owner, probably the head janitor, the window washer, and everything else that goes along with it, Rick Peters. How are you today?
I'm fine. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much for inviting me up here, and I've got to admit, I heard your commercial on WRNR, and I don't know it verbatim, but I mean, at one point you say, yeah, we've been around for 40 years, and I'm going, okay. Solar has not been around for 40 years, has it?
It sure has. Solar water heating has been around for thousands of years. I mean, the Romans used the sun to heat water. But more seriously to your question, solar water heating is an industry that has risen and fallen multiple times over the last 100 years. The first patent for a residential solar water heater was in Baltimore, Maryland in 1891. It was a booming industry, and it eventually got crushed by cheap gas. At one point, a significant number of the homes in Pasadena, California, had solar water heating systems. And then they discovered natural gas out there, and almost overnight, the solar water heating industry folded. So cheap energy is something that's crushed solar a few times in the past.
Okay.
We're in a era now where solar water heating is becoming less and less economical when compared to solar electric or photovoltaics, which is what we primarily install these days. Most of probably 95% of the installations we do now are solar electric system.
But so did you get your start in solar water?
Yes, my business partner did, actually. So I'm the president and one of the owners. I have a business partner who's the founder of Solar Energy Services. His name's Roger Perry. Roger started doing...
I've heard him on the commercials too.
Yeah, yep, and he's been on a few of them. Roger started doing solar right out of high school. He went to school out in Northern California. In the late 70s, early 80s, he was doing solar pool heating and solar water heating. And so that's really the story behind our 40 years. He restarted this company in 2005. He and I became partners in 2008 when I bought a minority share of the company and then later a majority share. So we're partners to this day, and that's really the story behind our 40 years. And we do disclose that on the website, and it's 40 years of experience that Roger's been in the solar business.
Well, without a doubt. Now, what's your background? If you came in here, I'll say this late in the game, but I mean, what's your background?
Sure. Well, I've had, I guess, 4 careers. My undergrad was in engineering and mechanical engineering, and I worked as a co-op student for David Taylor Research Center in Annapolis. So
okay.
I did submarine silencing there for the structure-borne noise group for several years as a co-op, and then full-time engineer for 4 years. Went back to school for business. Fell in love with manufacturing, spent about 4 to 6 years in manufacturing, the first 4 in production management, and then eventually went into sales and marketing to manufacturers. And then in the late 90s, I joined the IT business and worked for 9 years for a company called Data Prize. I was the 14th employee, and they were about 115 when I left, and actually the business just got acquired. So those were my careers before solar.
Wow, so it seems like you've got the background for, exactly the position you're in. I mean, you've got the manufacturing, you've got the tech, the engineering, and everything else that goes with it. I mean, it seems like you're like the ideal person to come in here to be able to get all the different facets of what Solar Energy Services does.
It's definitely been helpful, and I've always had an interest in doing something entrepreneurial, and I always wanted it to be something I was passionate about. So in 2008, my father passed away, and I had been looking at the solar industry for a couple of years, sort of casually up until then. And that kind of lit my fire. And so in the summer of 2008, I left my job. I had a very good job, well paid to join this industry. So I was either going to start a business, buy into one, or go work for a solar company. And I, through a lot of research and networking, I found my future business partner, Roger Perry, and we courted for a while and shook hands at the end of the year in 2008 and became partners then.
Probably one of the most scary times of your life, wasn't it?
It was indeed. In fact, to that point, less than a week out of work with no real firm plans of when my next paycheck was coming. And I was partners in a boat at the time, and it was a beautiful September day. I went to fill up my Parker 25.
Okay, those are those things that are holes in the water that you just pour money into, right?
Right. Well,
without a job, okay, I've got
exactly. So I just filled it up with gas, which was an expensive proposition. And I was bringing the boat back across the river, and I got a call from my financial planner to tell me about how Lehman Brothers had fallen off a cliff.
Oh, no.
And so it was a scary time for sure, and that sort of put an exclamation point on it. But in October of 2008 was when President Bush signed off on the bill that bailed the banks out, and tied to that was an 8-year extension of the solar investment tax credit.
Right.
So that was a good harbinger, and we certainly did our best to leverage that.
Well, okay, so now you're here from 2008. You were now in 2020. Mm-hmm. You've grown considerably, and I know that you're hiring pretty much. I would say consistently, but I know there's a big push for hiring and everything else. But how did this grow to the point where, and how big are you?
Well, we're still under 10 million in sales. We're a little over 40 people. I think we have 5 or 6 open positions right now. And how we got here, it was a lot of ups and downs. And in the industry, we affectionately refer to it as the solar coaster. For an industry that's fledgling and establishing itself with a lot of help from incentives at the federal and to some degree at the state and local level, it's been an exciting ride, because one of the challenges with incentives is they sometimes come and go, or they dissipate, and that can really affect the economics, which also affects demand and of course affects how we scale. So we've always been very careful here that we didn't want to grow too fast. We've seen peers of ours implode because they grew too fast, and so we've had some ups and downs over the years. When I got into the business with Roger, we were doing almost exclusively solar water heating in 2008. And then we started doing more and more solar electric. And because of the improved economics, we're doing almost exclusively solar electric.
Now, you guys do commercial and residential as well, too. I know that you did the solar at K&B True Value down in Annapolis with Jared Libman. And I know that you've done a couple of other ones in the area. But do you do residential as well, or is that your bread and butter?
It's really both. We have a longer history in residential, but we're about 50-50 in terms of where our revenues come from, commercial and residential. A lot of our commercial business is in D.C. The economics for solar in D.C. are tremendous, and so most property owners down there are at least considering solar. The residential business for us is a lot stronger in Maryland, and so it tends to. We do commercial work in Maryland. Like you mentioned, KB True Value. We did a real big project for Auburn Cat in Elk Ridge. We're doing several projects on the Eastern Shore right now. So our commercial business continues to grow geographically, but more than half of it is in Washington, D.C. still.
Well, I think that the solar industry, as far as on buildings, is somewhat more established right now. I've got a friend of mine that's all about but electric cars. Mm-hmm. And my mind has not changed that paradigm shift on electric cars. I'm like, well, I go to the gas station, I put gas in, and I go. And she says, well, that's what you need to think of electric as. I said, yeah, I know, but then I've got to sit for an hour while this thing charges or whatnot, and not every place has electricity and the whole 9 yards. Where you stand, where Solar Energy Services stands at this point now, that the solar as a home source of electricity, as a business source of electricity, is pretty established. I mean, this is not something you need to talk people into. I mean, they've obviously got to talk be talked into making the commitment to purchase it and everything else. But I mean, it's not this mumbo jumbo voodoo kind of thing out there that, hey, we put these little magic crystals on your roof and all of a sudden your electric bill goes down or anything like that.
That's right. I think you really make a good point. 10 years ago, there was a lot of convincing people that solar was for real, that they could count on it, that this was a good investment. I think for the most part, people who are paying attention to energy issues, and that's not everybody, but for the most part, people are seeing a lot of solar. People know someone who has solar. If you're an investor, you know that all the big banks are investing in solar projects. So all of this has validated solar as a dependable, reliable investment where you can get returns that are predictable. So that has definitely helped the market. So now it's more about selling why solar energy services versus another customer, or why you should do solar today and not 3 years from now. That's more of the sales challenge that we have than it is convincing people that solar
Which
works.
is probably no different than a car. Why do you want to buy the tech in today's car as opposed to tomorrow's or yesterday's or something like that? But explain how solar works to me. I mean, okay, sure. we put panels up on the roof of a building and we have them face east or west or some way, or maybe they track the sun. Does not replace my electricity?
Only in part, typically. So the way solar works in Maryland and 30 some other states that have a law called net metering is that you install these systems and they're grid tied. And what that means is the solar generator, the solar panels that we put on your roof, is now an energy generation system, and we have to get permission from the utility to connect that system to the grid. And what happens is your home uses the power first, and if there's any excess generation, it gets fed to the meter and actually goes out to the grid and literally gets consumed by the nearest load. So I have solar in my home, and on days...
There's a surprise.
And in the spring and fall, on bright sunny days when I'm not running the air conditioner or have any heavy loads, I'm generating more power on my roof than the home is using. And so that power actually exits through my meter, goes to the grid, and gets consumed by the nearest load. And my neighbors are paying the utility for the solar energy that I'm generating. And in turn, the utility, by virtue of the net metering law, the utility gives me credit for that energy that I exported so that I can consume those credits later in the evening or in the wintertime or when I'm not generating.
So if I were to try to simplify this, okay, you've got an electric meter sitting on the outside of your house, okay, and you turn off on every absolutely appliance in your house, okay, that little wheel starts to spin real quick, and they don't have wheels anymore, but that's, okay, the wheel starts to spin real quick. And the cash registers start to ring in BG&E. Okay, hey, they're using electricity, and so on and so forth. And then they send me a bill at the end of the month. With solar now, that wheel still continues to spin at the same degree, only there's solar panels on my roof that are coming back down. Now they're going back to that meter. And this is real simplified, and sort of spinning the wheel the other way to sort of reduce the cost and sending it back out?
Yes, in concept that is correct.
Okay.
Most solar systems, we backfeed the energy through a breaker in the
right.
home. Sometimes you have to line tap, but if there's available breakers and the sizing accommodates it, then we just feed it back out the breaker. But what happens is it goes to the loads first. So if your air conditioner is running in the middle of the summer and your solar's cranking, you're feeding the loads in the house first.
Your air conditioner first, and anything left over goes back out. Okay,
right.
Interesting. Is that the way it works with pretty much every commercial or residential? Doesn't matter?
Yes, if it's a behind-the-meter system. When you get to the large solar farms, those are utility-scale systems typically, so they're actually providing energy directly to the grid, and they have an arrangement with whoever is,
right.
is the counterparty.
The city of Annapolis just opened up one out at a closed landfill where they they're feeding it directly into BG&E. I think it said it's powering a school. They try to quantify it, I guess, to sit there and say, well, how much have we actually, well, it's enough to power a school. Mm-hmm. We hear a lot about owning versus renting. What is the advantage of either, or do you do both?
On the commercial side, we do both. The economics are much better for the homeowner, for the property owner, if they can own the system. So we do offer financing. We have loans that allow customers to cover the upfront costs and then pay back that loan with the returns that they're getting on the energy savings.
Just a general idea, and I know this is sort of like asking how much a car costs, but I mean, just a general idea. What type of investment are we talking about for a homeowner, for a typical home?
Sure. The average system in Maryland, it was around 8 kilowatts. I'm guessing it's probably closer to 9 kilowatts now. So that's going to probably be on the order of the low $20,000, $20,000 to $25,000 investment. And there's currently a 26% federal tax credit for that. So basically get that 26% of the sticker price back off of your taxes. And then in Anne Arundel County, we have a property tax credit of $2,500 up to $2,500. There's a state grant of $1,000. There's also another state incentive called SREC. So there's 4 different incentives to a residential property owner in Anne Arundel County.
So you're probably, by the time you're done with the incentives and stuff like that, 10 to 12, somewhere in there?
Yeah, in that range. And the payback for a good application in Maryland is about 7 years. In Anne Arundel County, it's about 7 years. So, these are systems that are warranted to produce for 25 years. You can expect meaningful energy for 30 years from these systems. So paying it back in 7 years is a pretty good deal.
Is not a bad.
Especially if you can eliminate your entire load, which I'm fortunate to be able to do that on my home.
Now, are there different sizes of panels, I'll say more powerful, more horsepower, more that you can put on a roof? Or is it can you only just collect so much solar?
Great question. I mentioned the average size system is 9 kilowatts. The average size system 6 or 7 years ago was like 5 kilowatts or 4 kilowatts. And that's oftentimes the same number of panels. It's just that the panels have gotten more efficient in the same footprint. So there are roughly 2 sizes of panels. There's little minor differences in dimensions, but for the most part, there's 2 sizes of panels. There's a residential size, which we call 60 cell in the business. There's 60 solar cells lined up in an array on that panel. And then commercial size panels, which are 72 cell. Most residential installations that we do have 60-cell panels on them. The panels that are on my roof that we installed in 2010 are 225 watts per panel. Today, in that same footprint, we're installing panels at 320, 330 watts in that same footprint. So that's a testament to how much solar efficiency has improved. And it's also really important to note that there's a long way to go. So there's so much potential to generate energy with solar. And by that I mean, right now, when I got into the business, solar panels were around 14% efficient. Now the average panel that we install, and there's premium, you can spend more for higher efficiency, but the average is in the 20 to 21% efficiency. So if those efficiencies continue to improve, it will be easy to offset all of the energy consumption in your home with a modest size roof. You won't need 3 different rooftops or whatever. So we've seen in the last several years the ability to offset 100% of the customer's energy is much more common than it was 5 years ago, and that's because of efficiency.
It's funny. I just jotted down here. You said that you installed your solar in 2010, and you are fortunate enough to be able to power your entire home. So essentially, you, and I realize it doesn't work this way, but you haven't gotten an electric bill in 10 years. And then sometimes they've sent you a check. But obviously that's not the way it works. It's the credits. But you are now energy, as far as the wallet goes, neutral.
Yes, more or less. To full disclosure, there is a connection charge, and which is totally understandable. I'm feeding back to the grid and I'm consuming from the grid. So there's an $8.95 a month charge to be connected to the grid. But otherwise, yes, I'm generating.
I need a business where I can charge people for them to give me stuff.
I'm generating credits half of the year, and I'm consuming those credits the other half of the year. So, this time of year, I'm still generating, but I'm using more than I'm generating on the average day. So I'm eating away at those credits, and then come April, it will get trued up. So once a year, the net metering law says these credits can only last a year, and so the utility will true up with me in April. And if I have excess credits, they will indeed send me a check, and they have. And then it'll be at the wholesale rate, not at the retail rate.
Sure.
But still, it's
well,
nice
at that point you're a wholesaler, so that makes
exactly.
How complicated is it to do it? Okay, I'm here. I want solar. I write you a check. Can you take care of me this weekend?
It's a little more complicated than that, but not extremely. We can do initial assessments remotely. Google Maps and other aerial photography services that we subscribe to, we're able to do a pretty robust design remotely. And then, of course, we do want to come on site and we want to assess the infrastructure, the electrical infrastructure in the home. Where's the meter? Where's the inverter going to be installed? Make sure we understand all the potential idiosyncrasies of the home or the needs of the customer. But we can do initial assessments with sort of a price conditioning. Here's the economics of the solar project for you, and we need to come out on site to validate this. And then as far as the timing goes, in some counties we have to provide structural engineering. Most counties we don't. Residential homes are built to this.
And when you're saying that's that the roof can support the panels, the weight of the panels?
And that's a requirement by the authority having jurisdiction or the permitting authority in some jurisdictions. So that takes a little bit of time. Then, of course, we have to go through the permitting process and get a building permit and an electrical permit.
Because it's considered a home improvement, obviously.
Exactly. Okay. And then once that all happens, forgive me, I left out a step. One of the first things we do is we get permission from the utility to interconnect the system. So we have to give them a rough design of what we're going to install. And then the utility has to confirm that the feeder can accommodate more solar. And that can be a challenge in some areas where you have a lot of solar penetration. So we need to get the utilities permission to install. Then we go through the engineering and permitting process, order the equipment, build the system, go through the inspections with the permitting authority. And once we pass inspections, then we go back to the utility for permission to operate. And that's usually just them swapping the meter out to make sure it's a net meter if it's not already, and then basically giving us the blessing to turn the system on. Okay. So that's the process. And that could be as short as 5 weeks. But typically it's more like 12 or more.
Okay.
And that some of that has to do with just the steps in the process, and some of it has to do with demand.
Right. And then if you're working in Annapolis or Anne Arundel County, it might be like 16, 18, 20, or 3 years.
Some jurisdictions are faster than others. I must say Anne Arundel County is one of the best places to do solar projects.
Really?
Yeah. They have a very good permitting system. They're not onerous in terms of their requirements. So, yeah, we really like building projects in Anne Arundel County.
Interesting. Where does most of your business come from? Or where do you do most of your business? Is it Anne Arundel County or is it? Our
residential business is probably the biggest county for us is Anne Arundel, but we do a lot on the Eastern Shore. We have several dedicated sales folks over there. In fact, our residential sales manager lives in St. Michael's. So we do a lot of work on the shore. We do a lot of large ground mounts on the shore. There's a lot of property owners that have a lot of land and they want to get to net zero and offset all of their electricity, and maybe they don't want to put it on the roof for whatever reason. The front of the house is facing south and they don't like the appearance on the front or whatever. We're doing a lot of large ground mounts over there that are getting customers to net zero.
Where do you see solar and solar energy services going from here? I mean, obviously you've grown incredibly since you came on board in 2008, and we've come a long way since the 1800s when we were doing solar water heaters.
I think nowhere but up. The industry continues to grow. The demand for what the industry provides continues to grow. Many solar contractors like us have committed to including storage in our offering. That's battery systems. So we have many residential customers. I think a year before last, it was almost 10% of them were purchasing battery storage with their solar system.
What's battery storage? Is that for power failure? Is that a UPS, big UPS for your house?
Essentially, and people do it for different reasons. Some of the folks are in rural areas and they've had some reliability issues with their power, or maybe they just have some essential loads that, like a water pump or a sewage pump or something like that they just don't ever want to be without, and they don't want to use a generator for whatever reason. So that, it's quiet, basically allows them more security. Some folks are doing it more just because they're preparing for worst case scenarios. Other folks are doing it just because they think it's cool and they think it's interesting, and they know that this is the wave of the future, so they want to participate in it.
On the wave.
Yeah. And so I think, to further answer your question, I think storage will continue to be paired with solar in increasing percentages. And that will eventually, as policy and grid operation adapt to that, I feel strongly that we will be migrating to more of a decentralized grid from the centralized approach that we have now. And I think very much like we saw with computers, where we had mainframes with dumb terminals, we migrated to client server, where we have many servers, redundant servers around, and smarter clients. We saw the same thing in telephony. In Africa, they sort of leapfrogged all the poles and wires and started doing cellular. I think a lot of experts in the energy industry feel that is where we're headed with energy. We're going to have lots of distributed generation around the grid, including lots of storage around the grid, and all of that's going to add energy security. It's going to, the military is way out in front on this. They've been doing microgrids for quite a while, primarily from an energy security standpoint. They want to be able to isolate themselves from the rest of the grid in an emergency. That has proven the model out. So universities have done it. The military's done it. We're seeing, various municipalities experiment with it. And so that trend is happening. Storage prices have dropped dramatically in the same way that solar has. We're 5 years behind solar on the curve probably, but still dramatic reductions in storage. And storage does so much for energy because it's got many value streams. Two of the biggest are that, of course, it can provide energy in times of excess demand, but it can also absorb and store valuable energy in times of excess supply. And so it has those two value streams. And then there's also other value streams that it offers to the grid operator that are a little more complicated, but there are many others. And so for that reason, the utilities even like storage. They might not like the fact that it's accelerating this migration away. Exactly. But a lot of people feel that the future of the utility is going to look different. We need to redesign their incentive systems so that they're incented to provide efficient delivery and transport of energy as opposed to selling more energy or building more assets.
Are most of your competition, I've seen a couple of them, they seem to be these national firms that just sort of market in different areas. And I know there was a huge thing with flower shops at one point. You'd have like an FTD warehouse that would take out ads and call, well, we are the AAA Anne Arundel County florist. And nobody really knows it because they don't exist. It's an 800 number, it's a website and everything else. That's one thing that I like about you guys. I drove up 97 you're here. You're in a building. You've got, people running around the office and everything else. And you're locally owned and you're locally operated. And you're working on local businesses and local homes. That's one, I think that's got to be a huge selling point for you guys.
I think it is. We certainly promote it and emphasize it. And my partner, Roger, and I are in this business for a lot of reasons. Obviously, we want to make a living, but we also want to support the growth of clean energy. It's very important to us. We also want to help create good jobs. And, that's something that's very satisfying about this job is you don't need a college degree to install solar. There's a lot of upside in terms of the training and the advancement opportunities. We've promoted from within with great success. That's really, I think, a great opportunity for the country. You can't export these jobs. These are jobs that, it's not like a manufacturing plant you can move offshore. People have to climb on the roof, and electricians have to, tie into the meter, and so. And it's really exciting to see. We don't hit a home run every time, but we participate in some training programs, one out of Baltimore, one out of D.C., that help folks that maybe come from at-risk backgrounds get their foot in the door in the solar industry, and we've got some real stars here that came through those programs. And to your point, it's great to be local. It's great to be able to promote that too, because people want to buy from somebody that's local, and they like the idea of somebody that is going to be around to support them in the future.
I'm assuming, and I could be wrong, you don't make the solar panels here. You're not fabricating. You're buying you're cutting them to obviously or sizing them to fit a specific roof or an angle or something like that. But I'm assuming that you do a lot of the assembly and you're not creating them.
We're not manufacturing anything here. That's correct. We purchase our racking and our inverters and our panels, which are the three primary components to a solar energy system. Of course, there's wire and nuts and bolts, fasteners, all those things. But most of the value in the value chain happens in the United States. So the engineering, the permitting, the sales, the installation, most of the racking and balance of system are all U.S. manufactured products. So there is a significant contribution to the economy besides just what we're...
And last question for you, Rick. You are turnkey, right? I mean,
yes, we are.
I turn around and I give you the check and I leave here today and I go on my world cruise or something like that and come back in 12 weeks. There's going to be operating solar panels on the roof of my house, money coming into my bank account from BG&E. and I mean, but you handle the permitting, the connection and everything else. I mean, there's nothing, I mean, I'm not running down to the permit office and signing this or that. I mean, you're just...
That's correct. We operate in Northern Virginia, D.C., Maryland, and Delaware, and we handle everything turnkey from start to finish on that. Now, I will say that for really large projects, and we're finishing up a 5,000 panel project in D.C., a big ground-mounted system, we utilized a lot of subcontractors. But for most of our commercial jobs and almost all of our residential jobs, these systems are being installed by our employees, and indeed they are turnkey.
Sure. That's all. It's good to know that it's all essentially hands-free. I mean, as a homeowner or as a business owner, there's, I need to make the commitment, and that's sort of where my involvement ends, and let the experts take care of it.
Yeah.
SolarSaves.net is your website, right?
That's right.
Is that one of the best ways to learn a little bit more about you? Or
I believe that is the best way. I mean, certainly you can give us a call or send us an email, and all that information is on our website. But we have a pretty robust website, and we think very informative. People find it a good resource where they can, if they choose to, learn a lot about solar before they start shopping. But we're happy to walk them through the whole process if they don't want to take that route.
Rick Peters from Solar Energy Services, thank you very much for your time.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this special podcast for Annapolis. Please be sure to visit Annapolis.net for all your local news, events, and opinions. And in case you haven't already, please subscribe to the Annapolis Daily News Brief, where we bring you your local news direct to your phone or tablet every Monday through Friday at 7 a.m. Subscribe on iTunes or Google Play.